The Book of Enoch, banned from the Bible, reveals shocking mysteries of our history.
I'm in the middle of the audiobook of the Book of Enoch, and it's one of the wildest things I've ever listened to in my life.
For centuries, Ethiopian monks guarded a book most of the world never read, until now. For over 1,000 years, Ethiopian monks preserved the Book of Enoch while the rest of the world forgot it. This ancient text, filled with visions of angels, fallen watchers, and divine judgment, survived in Ethiopia when it vanished elsewhere. Today, scholars are finally piecing together what these monks protected and why it mattered. Follow along as we uncover what the Book of Enoch reveals and why it was never meant to disappear.
Ancient Jewish text attributed to Enoch, who's the great-grandfather of Noah, is good enough to be quoted in the Bible, but somehow not good enough to actually be in the Bible.
The mysterious prophet who never died. The Book of Enoch focuses on one of the most unusual figures mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. In the book of Genesis, Enoch is identified as the seventh patriarch from Adam and is said to have lived for 365 years. This detail already sets him apart, but the account becomes even more distinctive when Genesis states that Enoch walked with God. Unlike the other patriarchs, whose lives end with a clear statement of death, Enoch's story ends differently, saying that he was not, for God took him, which suggests a departure from the normal human fate. For many centuries, this brief description led readers to ask questions that the biblical text itself does not address. The lack of detail about Enoch's end encouraged speculation about where he went and what it meant to be taken by God. Readers wondered whether he was taken to heaven, transformed in some way, or given a unique role beyond ordinary human life. These unanswered questions allowed later traditions to develop around his figure. The Book of Enoch presents itself as an attempt to fill in these gaps. It claims to preserve the words and experiences of Enoch himself, offering a detailed account of what happened after he was taken by God. According to the text, Enoch was brought into the heavens, guided through multiple celestial realms, and shown how the universe was ordered. He is portrayed as receiving explanations about divine judgment, the behavior of angels, and future events, along with instructions meant to be communicated to humanity. What makes the Book of Enoch especially significant is that it was not ignored in early religious communities. Early Christians were aware of the text, read it, and in some cases treated it as authoritative. The New Testament letter of Jude directly quotes a passage attributed to Enoch and refers to him as a prophet, indicating that Enoch's words were respected among the earliest followers of Christianity. This shows that the book had a recognized place in early Christian thought. Despite this early acceptance, the Book of Enoch gradually faded from mainstream religious use. Over time, it was excluded from official biblical collections and became unfamiliar to most believers. This shift raises important questions about how religious texts are preserved, transmitted, and sometimes set aside, leading to the situation in which a once influential work is now largely unknown outside of specialized study and specific religious traditions. The Watchers, angels who broke heaven's rules. The Book of Enoch contains some of the most stunning and controversial stories ever written about angels. According to the text, God assigned a group of celestial beings called the Watchers to observe humanity and watch over the earth. These weren't ordinary angels. They had specific duties and were supposed to remain separate from human affairs. But something went terribly wrong. The Watchers looked down from heaven and saw the daughters of men. The text describes how these human women were beautiful, and the angels became consumed with desire for them. 200 angels, led by an angel named Semjaza, made a pact on Mount Hermon. They swore an oath to descend to earth together and take human wives. This wasn't a small rebellion. These angels knowingly violated the natural order established by God. They abandoned their heavenly positions and crossed a boundary that was never meant to be crossed. The consequences would be devastating for both heaven and earth. The Watchers didn't just take wives. According to Enoch, they also began teaching humanity forbidden knowledge. One angel named Azazel taught men how to make swords, knives, shields, and armor. He showed women how to use cosmetics and ornaments. Other angels taught astrology, the cutting of roots for magic, enchantments, and sorcery. This knowledge might not sound harmful at first, but Enoch presents it as dangerous information that humans weren't ready to handle. The text suggests that humanity receiving this knowledge prematurely led to violence, corruption, and spiritual decay. Instead of developing naturally under God's guidance, human civilization was being artificially accelerated by rebellious angels with their own agenda. The Nephilim, when giants walked the earth. The union between the Watchers and human women produced offspring that were unlike anything the world had ever seen. These children were called the Nephilim, which translates to the fallen ones. According to the Book of Enoch, these beings were giants of enormous size and terrible strength. The text describes these giants as consuming everything in sight. They ate all the food that humans produced, then turned to devouring animals, and eventually began consuming humans themselves. The Nephilim were violent, destructive, and showed no regard for life. They represented the corruption of both the angelic and human realms. The Genesis account mentions the Nephilim briefly, stating that there were giants in the earth in those days. But the Book of Enoch expands on this in vivid detail. It portrays a world overrun by these hybrid beings who terrorized humanity and brought chaos to creation. These weren't just physically large humans. The text presents them as abominations that violated the natural order. Their very existence was a corruption of God's creation. The earth itself is described as crying out under the weight of its violence and sin. The Nephilim became warriors and leaders. They established kingdoms and ruled through fear and power. Some interpretations suggest that legends of heroes, demigods, and giants in various ancient cultures might be distorted memories of these beings. The mighty men of old, men of renown, mentioned in Genesis, could refer to these Nephilim who left such a powerful mark on human history that their memory survived for generations. The presence of the Nephilim is portrayed as one of the primary reasons God decided to send the flood. The world had become so corrupt, so twisted from its original design, that a complete reset was necessary. According to Enoch, the flood wasn't just about human sin. It was about cleansing the earth of these hybrid creatures and the corruption they brought. Enoch the messenger. While the world descended into chaos, Enoch maintained his relationship with God. The Book of Enoch describes how he was taken up into heaven multiple times to witness things no other human had seen. He traveled through different levels of the heavens, saw the movements of celestial bodies, and learned the secrets of creation. During these heavenly journeys, Enoch encountered archangels, including Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel. These beings showed him visions of past and future events. He saw the places of punishment prepared for the fallen angels. He witnessed the paradise prepared for the righteous. He learned about the cycles of nature, the calendar, and the ordained times. But Enoch was given a difficult task. God sent him to deliver a message to the fallen watchers. Imagine being a human asked to confront rebellious angels with news of their judgment. Enoch was told to inform them that they would receive no forgiveness, that their punishment was sealed, and that they would be bound beneath the earth until the final judgment. The text describes a powerful scene where the fallen angels, upon hearing Enoch's message, begged him to write a petition on their behalf. They wanted Enoch to ask God for mercy. These mighty beings, who had once stood in heaven, now trembled at the thought of divine judgment. Enoch wrote the petition and took it to heaven, but the answer was firm. God refused their request. The watchers had knowingly rebelled, and they would face the consequences. Their children, the Nephilim, would be destroyed in the coming flood. The fallen angels themselves would be imprisoned in darkness. Why the church said no. If the Book of Enoch was known to early Christians, and even quoted in the New Testament, its absence from the modern Bible raises important questions about how sacred texts were selected. The answer lies in a long and complex process in which religious authorities debated which writings should be accepted as authoritative and which should be set aside. These decisions were shaped by theological concerns, interpretive challenges, and the desire for consistency across growing Christian communities. By the 4th and 5th centuries, church leaders were actively working to establish an official biblical canon that could be recognized throughout the Christian world. Different regions had used different collections of texts, and leaders sought to create a standardized set that would guide doctrine and teaching. During this process, the Book of Enoch stood out as a difficult text to categorize because of its content, themes, and perceived origins. First, the book included detailed accounts of angels engaging in physical relationships with humans and producing offspring. Many church fathers struggled with this idea because angels were generally understood as spiritual beings without physical bodies. This raised theological objections, and some leaders concluded that such descriptions conflicted with accepted teachings about the nature of angels, leading them to question the reliability of the text as a whole. Second, the Book of Enoch placed significant emphasis on the role of fallen angels in introducing evil and corruption into the world. While human sin remained important, the book shifted much of the blame toward supernatural beings. This complicated developing Christian doctrines about free will, moral responsibility, and personal accountability. Some church leaders feared that this framework weakened the emphasis on human responsibility for sin. Third, the book contained extensive mystical material dealing with the structure of the heavens, the movement of celestial bodies, and detailed hierarchies of angels. Church authorities were concerned that such material could confuse believers who lacked the training to interpret it carefully. As a result, they tended to favor texts that focused more directly on ethical instruction, narrative history, and clear theological teachings rather than complex cosmological speculation. Fourth, questions about authorship played a major role in the book's rejection. By the time church councils were formally discussing the biblical canon, scholars understood that the Book of Enoch had been written centuries after the time of the biblical figure it claimed as its author. Linguistic and historical analysis dated the work to roughly 300 to 100 BCE, making it pseudepigraphical, or written under an assumed name. This raised doubts about its authority and authenticity in comparison to other accepted texts. Opposition to the Book of Enoch was not limited to Christian leaders. Some Jewish authorities also rejected it, and over time, it fell out of favor in both traditions. Church figures, such as Philastrius, explicitly condemned the book as heretical, while rabbinic tradition attributed strong denunciations to figures like Rabbi Simeon ben Yochai. As a result of these rejections, the Book of Enoch was excluded from official canons, discouraged in religious communities, and gradually disappeared from widespread use outside of Ethiopia. The Ethiopian Rescue. While the Book of Enoch was being rejected and forgotten throughout Europe and the Middle East, something remarkable was happening in Ethiopia. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church preserved this ancient text when everyone else was destroying or ignoring it. Ethiopia embraced Christianity in the 4th century, becoming one of the first Christian nations. When Ethiopian Christians translated their Bible into Ge'ez, their ancient liturgical language, they included the Book of Enoch as part of their Old Testament canon. They didn't see it as questionable or heretical. They viewed it as sacred scripture. For over 1,000 years, while the rest of the Christian world thought the Book of Enoch was lost forever, Ethiopian monks were carefully copying and preserving it in their monasteries. They included it in their worship services. They studied it as part of their theological tradition. They developed commentaries on it called Andemta, interpreting Enoch through a Christian lens. The Ethiopian Church didn't preserve Enoch by accident or rebellion. They had their own theological tradition that valued this text. In Ethiopian Christianity, the Book of Enoch helped explain the origin of evil, the role of angels in human affairs, and the coming judgment. It fit naturally into their understanding of biblical narrative. Ethiopian monks copied Enoch by hand, generation after generation. They kept it safe through wars, invasions, and political upheavals. These manuscripts sat in mountain monasteries, unknown to European scholars who assumed the book was permanently lost. The preservation of Enoch by Ethiopia is one of the most important contributions to biblical scholarship. Without the Ethiopian Church's dedication to this text, we would only have fragments and quotations. Thanks to their efforts, we have complete copies that scholars can study today. The shocking rediscovery. In 1773, a Scottish explorer named James Bruce was traveling through Ethiopia. Bruce was an adventurer and scholar who had heard rumors that the lost Book of Enoch might exist in Ethiopian monasteries. Most European scholars dismissed this as wishful thinking. The book had been missing for over a millennium. But Bruce persisted in his search. He visited monasteries and spoke with Ethiopian priests and monks. To his amazement, he discovered that the rumors were true. Not only did copies of the Book of Enoch exist, but they were treated as ordinary scripture by the Ethiopian Church. Bruce obtained 3 copies of the book and brought them back to Europe. This was a sensational discovery. Scholars had only known about Enoch through fragments and quotations from early church fathers. Now they had access to the complete text for the first time in Western history. The first English translation was published by Richard Lawrence in 1821. This created immediate excitement in academic and religious circles. People could finally read the full story of the Watchers, the Nephilim, and Enoch's heavenly journeys. It was like finding a missing piece of ancient religious literature. The discovery raised fascinating questions. Why had Ethiopian Christianity preserved this when everyone else rejected it? What could this text tell us about early Jewish and Christian beliefs? How did it influence other biblical writings? Over the following decades, more discoveries would add to our understanding of Enoch. In the late 1800s, Greek fragments were discovered in Egypt. These proved that Enoch had once circulated in Greek, just as scholars suspected. Dead Sea Scrolls confirm the ancient mystery. The story of the Book of Enoch took another important turn in 1947 when Bedouin shepherds discovered ancient scrolls hidden in caves near the Dead Sea at Qumran. These caves contained thousands of manuscript fragments belonging to a Jewish community that lived during the Second Temple period. The discovery quickly drew the attention of scholars around the world and became recognized as one of the most significant archaeological finds of the 20th century because it provided direct access to religious texts that had not been seen for nearly 2,000 years. Among the many scroll fragments recovered from the Qumran caves were multiple copies of the Book of Enoch. In particular, Cave 4 produced fragments from 11 separate Aramaic manuscripts of Enoch, indicating that the text existed in multiple copies rather than as a single isolated work. Together, these fragments represented roughly 1/5 of the full Ethiopian version of the book, showing that substantial portions of the text were already in circulation during the period when the Qumran community was active. This discovery was crucial for several reasons. First, it confirmed that the Book of Enoch was genuinely ancient rather than a later invention. Carbon dating placed the Aramaic fragments between 200 and 100 BCE, demonstrating that the text existed well before the time of Jesus. This establishes that early Christian writers did not create these ideas, but instead inherited them from earlier Jewish traditions that were already widely known. Second, careful comparison between the Dead Sea Scrolls fragments and the later Ethiopian manuscripts revealed a high level of consistency in content and structure. Despite the passage of centuries and the movement of the text across languages, the Ethiopian version preserved the material with notable accuracy. This finding validated the role of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church in transmitting the text and gave scholars greater confidence in using the Ethiopian manuscripts for study. Third, the sheer number of Enoch manuscripts found at Qumran indicated that the text held significant importance for the community that preserved the scrolls. In fact, more copies of Enoch were discovered than of several writings that later became part of the biblical canon. This suggested that the Qumran community regarded Enoch as authoritative and worthy of careful copying and preservation. Fourth, the Dead Sea Scrolls also included fragments of related works, such as the Book of Giants, which further developed themes found in Enoch. These texts showed that the Book of Enoch was part of a broader literary tradition within ancient Judaism. This wider body of literature influenced religious thought during the Second Temple period in ways that scholars had not fully understood before the discoveries. Taken together, the findings at Qumran transformed scholarly understanding of the Book of Enoch. The evidence demonstrated that it was not a medieval creation or a late addition to religious literature. Instead, it was an authentic ancient work that circulated widely in Second Temple Judaism and played a meaningful role in shaping the religious ideas of its time. What Enoch reveals about evil. One of the most powerful aspects of the Book of Enoch is its explanation for the origin of evil. The text presents a cosmic narrative that attempts to answer one of humanity's oldest questions: why does evil exist in a world created by a good God? According to Enoch, evil entered the world through the rebellion of the Watchers. These angels corrupted both themselves and humanity. Their forbidden knowledge accelerated human technological and mystical development before people were spiritually mature enough to handle it. Their offspring, the Nephilim, brought violence and chaos. This explanation provides a framework where evil isn't primarily about human failure, though humans certainly participate in it. Instead, evil has supernatural origins. It was introduced into creation by rebellious spiritual beings who violated divine order. Humans became caught in the middle of a cosmic conflict they didn't start. The text also describes what happened to the spirits of the Nephilim after the flood destroyed their physical bodies. According to Enoch, these disembodied spirits became the demons that continue to trouble humanity. This provides an explanation for the origin of demons that isn't clearly stated elsewhere in Scripture. Enoch's theodicy offers a different perspective than the Garden of Eden story. While Genesis focuses on human disobedience and eating forbidden fruit, Enoch focuses on angelic rebellion and forbidden knowledge. Both stories deal with boundaries being crossed and consequences following, but they emphasize different aspects of the problem of evil. The book also describes the judgment awaiting the fallen angels. They're bound beneath the earth in darkness, awaiting final judgment. This provides background for New Testament passages that mention angels being kept in chains until Judgment Day. Suddenly, those brief references make more sense with Enoch's fuller story. The heavenly calendar and divine order. A significant portion of the Book of Enoch deals with astronomy, calendars, and the movements of celestial bodies. This might seem strange in a religious text, but for Enoch, understanding the heavenly order was part of understanding God's creation. The book describes a solar calendar of 364 days, divided into 4 equal seasons of 91 days each. This calendar was different from the lunar calendar used by the temple in Jerusalem. The Qumran community, which preserved copies of Enoch, used this solar calendar for their religious festivals. Why did calendars matter so much? In ancient religious practice, timing was crucial. Festivals, sacrifices, and holy days needed to occur at the right times. If you used a different calendar than the temple, you would be celebrating festivals on different days. This created practical and theological conflicts. Enoch presents the solar calendar as divinely revealed, given to him during his heavenly journeys. He learned about the movements of the sun, moon, and stars from the angel Uriel. This knowledge wasn't just scientific curiosity. It represented understanding the order and harmony God built into creation. The text describes how celestial bodies follow fixed paths and laws. The sun rises and sets through specific gates in the firmament. The moon waxes and wanes according to divine design. The stars move in their appointed courses. Nothing in heaven is chaotic or random. Everything follows perfect order. This emphasis on celestial order contrasts with the chaos the fallen angels brought to earth. While heaven operates according to divine law and perfect timing, earth, under the Watcher's influence, became disordered and corrupt. The calendar and astronomy sections of Enoch emphasize that God's original design was orderly and good. Evil introduced disorder. Enoch's influence on early Christianity. The New Testament contains multiple passages that make much more sense when you know about the Book of Enoch. These connections show how influential Enochic traditions were on early Christian thought. The most obvious example is in the book of Jude, which directly quotes from Enoch. Jude writes, "Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied about them. See, the Lord is coming with thousands upon thousands of his holy ones to judge everyone." This is a direct quotation from 1 Enoch 1:9. Jude presents Enoch as a prophet and his words as authoritative. Peter's second epistle mentions angels who sinned being cast into hell and held in chains until judgment. This concept comes from Enochic tradition, not from Genesis. Genesis says nothing about angels being imprisoned, but Enoch describes this in detail, explaining how rebellious angels are bound beneath the earth, awaiting final judgment. Jesus himself uses the title Son of Man, which appears extensively in the Book of Enoch's parables section. While the phrase exists in the Old Testament, Enoch develops it into a messianic title describing a heavenly figure who will judge the world. The way Jesus uses this title reflects Enochic theology. The Book of Revelation contains imagery similar to Enoch's visions: heavenly throne rooms, angelic beings, cosmic judgment, and the binding of Satan. While John's visions are unique, they participate in an apocalyptic literary tradition that includes Enoch. Understanding Enoch helps readers understand Revelation's symbolic language. Early church fathers like Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, Origen, and Tertullian knew and cited the Book of Enoch. They treated it as authoritative when discussing the fallen angels and Nephilim. Some considered it scripture. This shows that in the first few centuries of Christianity, Enoch was widely read and respected. The modern fascination. In recent decades, interest in the Book of Enoch has exploded beyond academic circles. Popular books, YouTube channels, podcasts, and documentaries explore its stories and implications. Why has this ancient text captured modern imagination? Part of the appeal is that Enoch deals with topics people find endlessly fascinating: angels, demons, giants, ancient mysteries, and hidden knowledge. In an age skeptical of traditional religious explanations, Enoch offers a different narrative that feels more cosmic and mysterious. Some people see connections between Enoch's descriptions of the Watchers and modern UFO encounters. They point to passages describing angels descending from the sky in luminous vehicles and teaching advanced knowledge. While this interpretation goes far beyond the text's original meaning, it shows how adaptable Enochic mythology is to different worldviews. Others appreciate that Enoch was preserved by African Christianity. In discussions about decolonizing theology and recognizing non-European Christian traditions, the Ethiopian Church's preservation of Enoch becomes symbolically important. It demonstrates that African Christianity has ancient roots and preserved texts that European Christianity lost. The Book of Enoch has influenced popular culture significantly. Fantasy and science fiction authors draw on its imagery of fallen angels and giants. Video games incorporate Nephilim and Watchers into their mythologies. Movies reference Enochic themes, even if they don't cite the source directly. Scholars continue producing new translations and commentaries. Since 2000, the Enoch Seminar has held regular academic meetings dedicated to studying Enochic literature and its influence. This scholarly attention has produced a deeper understanding of how Enoch fits into Second Temple Judaism and early Christianity. What can we learn today? Whether someone considers the Book of Enoch scripture or ancient mythology, it raises questions worth considering. What are the boundaries between the spiritual and physical realms? How does knowledge shape society? What is the origin of evil? How should humans relate to higher powers? The story of the Watchers warns about crossing boundaries that shouldn't be crossed. The angels who abandoned their proper role brought disaster on themselves and others. This resonates with modern concerns about technological advancement without ethical consideration. Like the Watchers teaching forbidden knowledge, humanity now possesses power that could cause tremendous harm if misused. The Nephilim narrative explores what happens when the powerful exploit the vulnerable. These giants consumed everything, showed no restraint, and terrorized those weaker than themselves. The text presents their destruction in the flood as necessary justice. This raises questions about how societies should deal with concentrated power and systematic oppression. Enoch's heavenly journeys emphasize that there's more to reality than what we can see. Whether interpreted literally or metaphorically, these visions suggest that understanding the world requires looking beyond surface appearances. Divine order exists even when earthly chaos seems to reign. The book's preservation by Ethiopian Christians reminds us that Western Christianity isn't the only form of Christianity. Other ancient Christian traditions have different canons, different emphases, and different insights. Exploring these differences enriches rather than threatens faith. For those who view Enoch as scripture, it provides additional context for biblical narratives. For those who see it as ancient literature, it offers a window into how people in the ancient world understood good and evil, angels and demons, and divine judgment. The Book of Enoch survived despite long odds. Written thousands of years ago, it was rejected by most Jewish and Christian traditions, but preserved by Ethiopian monks, later rediscovered by a Scottish explorer, and supported by fragments found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. Centered on fallen angels, giants, and heavenly secrets, it influenced early Christianity, shaped interpretations of biblical passages, and continues to spark debate. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church's preservation of the text ensured that Enoch's vision survived, allowing modern readers to reflect on ancient questions of good and evil, humanity, and divine judgment. What's your take on the Book of Enoch? Do you think it should have been included in the Bible, or were church leaders right to leave it out? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.